So, it is my great pleasure to introduce Alex Wilson, the president of the Resilient Design Institute and the founder of the Vermont company Building Green, both located here in Brattleboro. Another really incredible national hero in this field we have right here in our own community, which is very exciting. He's going to talk about the development and deployment of resilient homeless shelters. And just a little personal fact, which I find very inspiring in my post and beam converted barn. He lives in a 200-year-old zero-energy home that demonstrates sustainability and resilience, which for our housing stock I see as quite an inspiration in and of itself. So looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Emily. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about an effort to address homeless housing. And we saw in our last presentation, for those of you who are here, information about the Great Terrace Project, which is an awesome project in North Brattleboro. I went to the opening yesterday, and it's really inspiring to see what's done, but it's not going to solve all of our problems. Next slide, John. So there are big problems throughout the country in homelessness. And in some parts of the country, the problems are increasing. And in an ironic sort of way, some of our best laid plans to address affordable housing have exacerbated the issue of homelessness. 30, 40 years ago, a lot of people lived in single room occupancy buildings, which, today are looked at as really horrible places. The down and out are in SROs in our inner cities. But when they were 40 years ago, these were good places to live. They weren't just for the destitute, they were places you could start a career in. You shared some facilities. It was sort of like an extended roommate arrangement, and could find housing in a very affordable way. So in the next slide, I show sort of a number of different options for affordability. Again, it's hard to see this, but ranging from tents starting at $20 up to accessory dwelling units that can be upwards of $100,000. So there's a whole range of options that can serve homeless. The second option from the left is a sleeping pod. And then moving along there is detached bedroom, RVs, tiny houses, and then accessory dwelling units. So I'm going to be talking about something between the tiny house and the sleeping pod, and I'll explain what I mean by that as we move ahead. Next slide. So this is an image of a project in Austin, Texas that my wife Geraldine and I had a chance to visit when we were there in February. It's called Community First Village. It's a village of 120 tiny homes, 100 RVs, and 20 tent cottages, all serving people who were previously chronically homeless. A lot of people with psychological problems or had substance abuse problems. And it's a really amazing community that's really the largest of its kind in the country. And we spent a while, next slide, it's a real mix of houses in this project. Of the tiny houses, these are all custom designed. So the Community First Village, which was an outgrowth of an organization called Mobile Loaves and Fishes, which provided meals to the homeless. And they've now served over 5 million 5 million meals in the Austin area. But they set out to provide a housing option for this same community of people. The houses are the tiny houses are typically designed by local architecture firms. The firms actually pay for the privilege to design these homes. Many of them are built by either universities or custom home builders that do it as some of their pro bono activities. Anyway, so it's a great place to see the range of options available with tiny houses. They tend to be more expensive, tiny houses. Each one is different, really attractive. You can go through a couple of these slides. Very interesting designs. What we're going to do, and you can fast forward through these, the Resilient Design Institute got some funding to look at this model of homeless housing and figure out what it would take to design homes that would be resilient, comfortable, affordable to build in a cold climate. Shown here, by the way, is a kitchen. The model that is used in Austin is that the homes are sleeping only, sleeping and living and storage. The restroom facilities are in separate buildings, restrooms, laundry, shower, and kitchens. Kitchens are separate from those restroom buildings, but it's sort of a campground model. And that model has been used very successfully in the Pacific Northwest, particularly Seattle, Portland, Eugene, and as well as Austin. The big difference is that those climates are pretty easy climates in terms of heating. So having a model where people leave their tiny house to go to a restroom facility in the middle of the night in the winter works okay in Austin or Seattle or Portland. It's not going to be as easy here. So we got some funding, the Resilient Design Institute, to figure out what it would take to design tiny homes that would serve the homeless in our climate, and we'll be addressing, the issue of toilets and looking at the possibility of composting toilets as an option. The advantage of not having toilets and kitchens in each home is cost. We saw in the last presentation this awesome project in North Brattleboro, but those units cost $200,000 a piece. They're fantastic, but there's a big segment of need out there that isn't going to be met at $200,000 a piece. So, we're looking at ways to dramatically reduce the cost, and a huge part of that is getting the plumbing out of the homes, keeping the plumbing in common buildings, where you can spend the money on the sewer hookups, the water supply, and so forth. So we have in our project a number of goals. There's a list coming up here that, you might be able to read some of this. Starting with low cost of construction. The homes that are being built in Seattle, and I'll show some images in a few minutes, are being built for $2,200 a piece in material cost. And then the labor to assemble these, to build the units, is volunteer labor that a corporation might, create a work day where their employees can work on building these homes in a group build, sort of a Habitat for Humanity model. Ease of construction and assembly, the ability to modularize these or panelize them so that they could be built off-site and assembled on-site, or shipped as a kit of parts that could be assembled on-site. We want them to be energy efficient and also exhibit some, what we refer to as passive survivability, an ability to maintain some level of habitability if they lose power. We anticipate having utilities in these buildings, and we're going to be talking in a design charrette coming up next week about what the heating system will be, what sort of cooling might be necessary, if any. But we anticipate very low-cost systems, so it'll probably be a little bit of electric resistance heat with very well-insulated building envelopes. Again, these are very small buildings. In Seattle, they're building 8 by 12 foot buildings, similar in Portland and Eugene, Oregon. So pictured here is a project in Portland, Oregon, Portland State University was involved with this. If you could go back to that image showing the framing. They basically, every year in Portland, they have a big bluegrass concert and build a stage to, have performances in. And then they've, in past years, just taken the stage down and trashed it. Last year, in designing that stage, they designed it so that the components could be reused in homeless housing. So they did a design charrette and came up with a design to utilize these trusses that were designed for the stage, both as the roof and the walls for the 8 by 12 foot homeless shelters. So we're looking to do something kind of like this in this design charrette next week. Looking at what we can do in, again, our climate to optimize material use, optimize energy performance, hopefully incorporate some renewable energy, solar gain, perhaps some photovoltaics, but doing so in a very low-cost manner. So that truss design that they used for the walls ended up working out really well in providing additional storage space. One of the key priorities in housing for the homeless is security. People, homeless people need a place to store their belongings where they'll be safe. This is one of the challenges with tents. They can't be locked, or if they are locked, they can be broken into with a utility knife. So a permanent structure provides some security for people to protect their belongings. Next slide. So again, they built 30 of these homes using materials from this stage that was dismantled. In our design exercise, we're looking at ultimately developing structures that can serve not only the homeless community, but maybe with some modifications, the disaster recovery emergency housing needs. So for that, we want structures that can be dismantled and taken to a new site. And that may be important with homeless housing as well, where a particular village for development might have use of a lot for 3 years, but then that's going to be where a hospital gets built or something. So an ability to relocate these structures. Here these Portland projects assembled on a parking lot for then deployment. Next slide. This is another project in Portland, Oregon, looking at a modular design using plywood. And I think they got some funding from the plywood industry on this. But it's a neat system that has these sort of modules that can be assembled in different order to create different spaces and customizable spaces. One of our priorities with this is to create homes that people can be proud of and do a little bit of customization within the confines of the cost effectiveness, but through paint color, through designing the front entryway, we want buildings that people will feel good enough about that they want to maintain them and have them be something that they're proud of. This is in Seattle, where there are at least 4 villages now that have been supported by the city of Seattle, typically 30 to 40 units per project. And again, these are the homes that are being built for $2,200 in material cost. Next slide. And these are built through group build exercises. So anyway, to bring this to a close, what we're doing, with the Resilient Design Institute, we got this funding. We're developing prototype designs. We're doing a design charrette next week in Keene. So we're trying to develop a number of prototype designs. We want to actually build one of them, not next week, but hopefully this fall, and test it throughout the winter. We're working with Keene State College on this, and we're hoping to get students who would work on monitoring the building and testing it during the year. And then the hope in a later phase would be actually getting funding and partner organizations to build a village using these prototype designs within our Ecovation Hub region. And this project kind of emerged out of this local or regional economic development project that's now called the Ecovation Hub. And it's a project to create jobs in the region that was served by Vermont Yankee, or that the employee shed of Vermont Yankee. We lost Vermont Yankee as an employee. 600 jobs were, well-paying jobs existed there. So there's a local effort serving southern Vermont, southwestern New Hampshire, and the upper Pioneer Valley of western Massachusetts to create jobs within the so-called clean economy. And one of those ideas would be creating a business ultimately that would build structures like this, either as kit structures, as modular structures, as panelized structures, or as designs that could be shipped and create local jobs and local enterprise. So next slide. There are a couple of books that are really informative. I just read the book on the right, Welcome Homeless. It's an account by the founder of the Community First Village in Austin, Texas. A really powerful book. That community has a significant religious foundation, which I don't relate to as much, but this book paints a picture of what homelessness is. And I found it incredibly valuable as we're trying to envision what we need to provide in the designs we're working on to understand more about what homelessness is and what it means. The book on the left I'm reading currently, Tent City Urbanism, and this is a fascinating book that kind of talks about the history of homelessness, the history of tent villages that have popped up at various times, starting with the Hoovervilles in the Great Depression. But the evolution from tent cities or tent villages to tiny house villages is addressed in this book, and great resources. Next slide. And then if people want to follow our work through the Resilient Design Institute, follow our website, resilientdesign.org. You can sign up to get notifications when we've posted new information. But we'll be working on these designs over the next 6 months and hopefully coming up with some really good solutions for a cold climate. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll take those.
Thank you, Alex. So we have 2 questions here. Please put your hand up if you have another question that I need to collect. And if you don't have a little slip of paper and you have a question, there's one near you, I promise. How difficult was it for Austin or any of the other neighborhood projects that you looked at to find the needed land? Or how easy? Let's try to be a little appreciative on this one.
And there's a great chapter in Welcome Homeless that talks about that. The founder, Alan Graham, had great success in getting the mayor of Austin excited about this, and the entire city council unanimously supported this vision of a village of tiny homes in downtown Austin. They had a site of land, they had raised the money to buy it, and they were moving full force ahead with full city support. And then they had public meetings about it. And the NIMBYism, not in my backyard, came in fast and furious, and it became a huge issue. They ended up backing out of that site and 2 or 3 other sites that they found within the city limits of Austin. In every case, there was a NIMBY reaction from neighbors. So they ended up buying a site just outside the city limits of Austin that doesn't have zoning. And, that's Texas, and live free or die west.
New Hampshire.
I know. They've got their own version. Anyway, they've built it just outside the city limits, and it's working extremely well. And they aren't having problems. They have public transit into downtown. It's, I think, 7 miles from the center of downtown Austin. But it was a huge challenge finding a site. And in Seattle, the city has been very supportive of it and has found sites for them. But it is always a challenge with the not in my backyard sentiments.
Thank you. Another question. What sort of resilient housing options are being looked into for families who don't have housing in addition to individuals? I know it's a big challenge in our community,
Yeah,
especially single parents.
That's a great question, and one we've talked about with our project that we're having this design charrette at Keene State College about. Our initial work is looking at very small homes that 8 by 12 feet, that scale, really optimized for an individual, maybe a couple. A later phase of that would be modifying those designs to serve families or larger family settings, maybe an aging parent or kids. But that is a challenge. So that's something we're looking at. The initial phase will be mostly looking at units designed for a single person.
Thank you. And then our final question is, in the Austin example or any of the others you looked at, were there supportive services integrated the same way we see at Great River Terrace here?
Very much so in Austin. They have a whole infrastructure with counseling, with a wide range of support services. I don't know enough about the projects in Seattle and Portland. I'm hoping to get out to Seattle this October and plan to look into that. But that's a big issue. The vision that we have for a village in Keene or Brattleboro or Greenfield would be, the tiny homes clustered around a community building, much like Great River, and but unlike Great River, more of the utility services would be in the community building, but there would be meeting spaces as well, and places where there could be medical clinics and other services that are provided. But, yeah.
Thank you very much, and let's all thank you, Alex, for coming.